Okay, so this is the first. First of all, this is the first time I've ever done this. So anyone,
Well, you are doing really well so far.
so
You're
far,
very, very
Really,
good.
you're very good, very professional.
very
And we should
professional.
just say to everyone that Josh has just been on stage all day long filming something at the National Theatre. So I think he deserves a big round of applause for that. And
Ah,
thank you, Josh, for doing this.
Thank you, Josh. It's what this is possibly my happiest moment I've ever had. Looking at two of my favourite people, both of whom I've been so incredibly blessed to work with and call my friends. So, I mean, I'd like it if we could just have a chat about what we've been doing, but
well,
I guess we should talk about Ammonite.
we're here to talk about Ammonite, which, to give everyone a background, I was very lucky to see it a little while ago, and Francis kind of got it over to me. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a masterpiece. And from an actor's point of view, Kate's performance and Serge's performance are incredible and mind-blowing and completely transformative. And I've got to know Kate a little bit since, and it's a completely different character. It's kind of extraordinary. So in terms, firstly, Francis Lee, how did this come about? You obviously made God's Own Country. How quickly after did you know that you wanted to write this story, and how did it start?
Well, it was actually when we were promoting God's Own Country and we were touring around the world in the UK and doing a lot of promotion for God's Own Country. And I was looking for a gift, a polished stone or a fossil for a friend at the time. And I kept coming across this woman's name, Mary Anning. So I read about her and I was instantly struck by her circumstances. Here was this working class woman born into a life of poverty in an incredibly patriarchal, class-ridden society. And through her own ingenuity, self-taught knowledge, determination, and this real sense I had that she had this will to survive, became what we would now call one of the leading paleontologists of her generation. And it was those circumstances really that really propelled me to investigate what that must have felt like to be a woman, a working class woman in this very, very strict male-dominated world. And as she progressed in her life and her career, men would come and buy her relics, as she called them, her fossils. And they would reappropriate those finds for themselves. So in her lifetime, she never had any recognition, really. And it was those circumstances that really pushed me to look at her. There were very little parallels between Mary's life and my life. I'm not saying I was as brilliant as Mary Anning at all, but I grew up in rural northern England, into a very working class family, didn't have access to a great education. Always knew I wanted to write and direct, but just didn't know how I could get to what looked like a very kind of privileged profession that was populated with people who weren't like me.
Brilliant. And Kate, what in terms of how did the script come to you, and what was your sort of first impressions? What was what grabbed you about Mary and Francis and this film?
I'm so excited to be talking to you, Josh, actually. It's just so great. It's just a great opportunity, though, because when we normally do Q&As, it typically isn't an actor and a director who's asking the question. So it's just a lovely little sort of treat as part of how we're doing this press. I was sent the script and there seemed to be some degree of urgency around it at the time. I received it quite late in 2018. I was filming something else that was quite difficult, this other thing I was filming. And I always have a little bit of a hard time reading other projects when I'm working on something else. But my agents, who I've been with since I was a teenager, both said, look, can you just please try and read this quickly? Because the director, Francis Lee, really wants to move forward swiftly with a production date. And it would be helpful if they had some idea as to whether or not you feel you might be interested. And I had actually, I just finished work for the day. I was very tired and just thought, God, I just have to read it at the weekend. I thought, no, actually don't. And I read it now. And I had seen God's Own Country and had been truly, truly blown away by it and by both of your performances and the writing and the directing. But it was the rhythm and the energy and the sincerity and purity of the connection between the two central characters in God's Own Country that made me feel so inspired to just immediately. I was so excited to read Ammonite because of your film, and I read it at 3 o'clock in the morning and said yes when everyone else woke up. And I was daunted. I was daunted, and I thought, who is this Francis Lee, this sort of new kid on the block, even though he's actually an old fart. But there is something very unique about Francis's rhythm as a filmmaker that I hadn't seen in a very long time, and I know that I haven't been in a film like God's Own Country, and what I felt Ammonite might also be like, based on what I had seen. But I had this sort of overwhelming feeling that, quite selfishly, I just thought, I can't let someone else play this part. I just knew I would find that really distressing. And it was very clear to me that the only person who could play Charlotte was Saoirse Ronan, and I sort of didn't dare think it, just in case Francis wasn't thinking the same thing. And within 24 hours of reading the script, we had our first conversation, and he did reveal that absolutely he believed that Saoirse was right for Charlotte. And so I was just doing backflips from the word go. And then sort of creeping up on Mary a little bit. I had a good few months to prepare, which was really lovely. And just trying to make her my own, which was tricky because people do have quite strong opinions about who she was. People who move in geological circles, people who are from Lyme Regis, they feel very strongly about Mary as though she's one of their own. And so I felt a responsibility to honor the essence of who she was, in terms of her work and in terms of how she lived her life. But at the same time, I felt I had to add a certain degree of grounded backstory that perhaps might not have been written about. And for me, that came into play when I read about the loss of a lot of her siblings, but in particular her connection with her father, who had died when she was about 10 or 11 years old, quite suddenly. And he had taught her everything that she knew about fossil finding, about paleontology. And it seemed to me she had a very special bond with her dad. And I actually have a very special bond with my dad. And that's not something I've ever been able to explore on screen before. And the loss of her father, for me, signified a huge turning point in Mary's emotional life, from which point on, I believe she had sort of certain emotional chips that were then therefore missing, and a little bit of an abandonment issue, I felt. And that, for me, was what underpinned her inability to openly love freely, to function in social circles with any degree of confidence. And also not knowing how to express real love or a little bit of natural envy, or perhaps sometimes jealousy, without it coming across in quite a clunky and awkward emotional way. So those were the things that, for me, once I'd sort of educated myself about who she was and her pioneering discoveries, I focused much more on the emotional person that she had become as a result of her childhood and her life.
And
massively long answer, sorry.
Sorry. Very good. Much better than my answers when we did God's Own Country, I have to say. But in terms of preparation, I mean, obviously I know that Francis is meticulous and kind of obsessive about creating a world that feels authentic. And obviously we experienced that when we watched the films, because of, the extent of like the sound design of the film and the kind of, we know that Francis creates these sort of encyclopedic sounds that go into his films. Is there a kind of, I don't know who this is to really, but was there a sort of, it feels like a match made in heaven in terms of Kate, the little I've spoken to you has been about all about detail and that you're obsessive about detail. And Frances, I know that you really are. Was that a kind of, did you know that, Frances, about Kate?
No, I didn't. It was brilliant, really, because when we first spoke on the phone after Kate had read the script, and I started to describe very gently how I like to work, which is, you know, an extensive preparation period, maybe four months before the shoot, where we would talk and we would meet and we would build this character from scratch, and we would research every single detail about this person and their life right up until we meet them in the film. And then, you know, I very tentatively said to Kate Winslet, oh, and, you know, it would be really great if you went out onto those beaches and learned how to fossil and worked with an expert. And Kate just went, yeah, no, this is what I do. This is what I love. And my heart just like exploded with joy, really, because I thought, oh, thank God, brilliant, amazing. We're going to be able to go on this journey together. And it was really, really satisfying because Kate, we did all of that. We worked for months and months before the shoot. And Kate did go out onto those beaches and worked with a wonderful fossil expert down in Lyme Regis called Paddy Howe, and became quite the expert at finding fossils. But also, what was brilliant about that was while Kate was on those beaches, getting cold and wet and tired and hungry and getting aching hands and sore feet, we were able to really push all of those things into the performance. You know, really kind of use all those very visceral feelings for how Mary was going to be embodied both physically and emotionally. Actually, look, I'm at my work table, and this is what Kate found.
Oh, I think I've seen this. I think
as he drops it, it's a flipping vertebrae. That was an ichthyosaur vertebrae found by me.
Yeah.
And Kate, did you what in terms of prep? Was it quite exciting to be working with? Because I know that in my little experience, it is so hard now when we're making stuff so quickly and we're having to make stuff quickly, and people's schedules, particularly you, it's like film to film to fit, and you're having to kind of fit stuff. How is it finding the time to do the kind of prep that I know you and Frances wanted to do?
Well, the film that I was doing at the time that I read Ammonite was a small film called Blackbird, but it was about assisted dying, and actually I had lost my own mother just a year earlier, and so actually that I ended up doing this film that was about the assisted death of a mother played by Susan Sarandon. I was all sort of a mess, and it was definitely part of my process of letting go of my own mom. And so I was in this kind of real state and quite looking forward to truly having a break. I felt like I had sort of emotionally really buried my mum finally, and that was a strange thing that came as a result of being a part of Blackbird. And I wasn't really wanting to actually throw myself into work again because I was really tired. But it's the first time in my life where I thought, you know, actually, it's okay to just use the tiredness and be a little bit method. And I realized quite quickly that actually, if I was going to overcome the fear I had about playing Mary, that maybe I needed to try and be a bit more methody than I think perhaps I'm normally comfortable with. I actually kind of don't even like the word method. I find it a bit irritating, to be honest. And it doesn't always work for me. And I do flip in and out of character on set. I know some actors who stay in character all day long, which I find profoundly annoying. And I was able to jump in and out of Mary on the day, but the only reason I was able to do that was because I had done all of this work. It is quite meticulous work, and I do like to do a lot of preparation. And it was adorable when Frances was saying to me, "This is what we'll do, and you know, your feet might hurt, and it might get cold, and we might not give you a coat." And I'm like, "Yeah, oh God, like, bless him," because of course I love that stuff and live for that stuff. But for some characters that doesn't always work, and sometimes letting go of the preparation and being a little bit more spontaneous is also an okay state to be in. But it wasn't for Mary. I had to really, I had to learn to love the injuries I would sustain daily on my hands and let them be there. And in actual fact, you see a lot of them in film. They were real, and I have a few scars to prove it. But yeah, creating a sort of a backstory and a history for a character Well, as you'll know yourself, it's